Hey everyone, we're back with another AI conversation. I'm here joined again, no, on third time on the podcast, Jim Miraflor. Welcome back, Jim. How's things?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I just woke up, so I'm having my coffee right now.
Yeah, that's great. Morning coffee is always a gem. Anyway, ano, parang kanina offline, we were talking about automation and economics, and you said, Jim, that you had a presentation that you gave recently, and maybe you want to share it, and then let's talk about it, no? Because I think thankfully, para lang for an update, since we started these conversations, the tone about AI has shifted dramatically in the Philippines. It's less about the doom and gloom. It's less about existential risks, because everyone loves talking about that. And nowadays, it's closer to practical. Parang, how do you implement this? How will this
Yeah.
affect my company? How will this affect
Mm.
the country? Which I think is the better place to be. Obviously, there are still existential challenges, and I'm talking to other people about safety also. But it's just one of the many considerations. So I'm very happy that we can talk more about no, the practical approaches to automation and the implications to economies and society. So, anyways, again, take it away, no, if you want to share anything.
Yeah. So basically, what I plan to say is something about not really the existential risks of AI, but more like its current risks in terms of maybe we are reorganizing our society based on AI in such a way that the majority of us might not be able to hitch on the ride, and maybe the the power of AI might be controlled by just a select few, and
Mm-hmm.
if that is so, what will be the implications of that in terms of how we live, and at the same time, how do we reorganize our strategies, the way we do things as a society, that we transform the potential of AI into into something that gives prosperity to all, and not just to a few individuals. So that's my talk. So basically, I'll be drawing from economics. I'll be drawing from people like Piketty, Solo, and yeah,
Sige, just explain it.
yeah.
I'm not too familiar with a lot of the names you're mentioning, no, but
Yeah.
hopefully I can react. Sige, excited
Sige,
to see it.
sige. There'll be just a few slides with math. So, kasi economics, so we have to, yeah,
It's
it can't be
inescapable.
avoided.
Mathematics is part of life. Sige, whatever. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
So yeah, so I'll be talking about the economics of automation, and a view of a post-capitalist future, if you want to see it that way. Of course, economists don't usually see it that way, right? Since all of their science is based basically on the perpetuation of the market systems, and the capitalist society. So yeah, just a caveat.
Well, we've been in the hands of economists forever. I'm not an economist, but I
Yeah.
don't think they'll mind too much if I say I don't think they got it right all the time. So let's see, no, what maybe we
Yeah.
can do a better approach.
Let me start by saying something scary. Well, it's not really scary, but of course, Marx is known as a revolutionary thinker. But in this particular snippet from the preface of a contribution to the critique of the political economy, basically he's saying that all of our society operates under a material basis. And if that material basis change, so for instance, technologies, productivity, etc., it will reverberate, it will cascade into a social change, into a restructuring of the way we relate to as workers, and capitalists, as family members, etc. So it cascades. The material basis is sort of the foundation to which we do things as a society. And if that is changed, then we might expect a new society to be born, right? It's not possible for us to maintain our culture, our institutions, if the material basis has already changed. So yeah, it's a good quote. So if you want to,
This
if the readers to want,
particular literature, was this a precursor to the manifesto or after the manifesto came out?
it's already after the manifesto, when he was already able to sort of have a more sophisticated analysis of political economy, political economic forces.
Okay.
Yeah. So there. So the outline is basically I'll be discussing the problems of capital and how it produces inequality. The presence of because of course capital or basically are instruments that takes the form of capital is supposed to be there to help us, right? To increase our productivity, to do things that we are not able to do anymore, so that we'll have more time to do other things. But the effect has not been across history. The effect has not been too friendly to workers. And yeah, so we will discuss how it translates into a productivity paradox, into underconsumption, and we will take a peek into what full automation would look like under a capitalist or free market system. And we will be discussing the solution. So basically, how do we transition out in such a way that benefits us all, maybe through universal basic income, through a more democratic capital allocation. And of course, since we are saying that the future is the future of play, right? It is really something that we don't want to do our jobs anymore because we want to do it, but because it's something that regardless of how good we are at it, at those particular tasks, we see our labor as our creative expression. So basically, we want to transition to a society of full unemployment and with full play. So how do we do that? Because right now we are not even fully employed, right? So how do we go to full employment and towards full unemployment? Basically, we want a society that automation is for all, and in a way that we can create a heaven in earth, right?
So when you say full unemployment, it's because the machines are taking over, parang ganun, all of the work.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we begin with what we have right now. So we have a very concentrated structure of wealth, uh, where 1% of the adult, 1.1% of the adult controls 45.8% of the wealth. And if we are going to look at history, it's actually worsening. So we have the billionaires who own the same health as half of the world shrinking from 350 billionaires to just a scant few, as we've seen earlier. And this trend is actually increasing across multiple countries. And if you're going to look at those who actually own the wealth, uh, you will see that it is the tech companies, the tech moguls who do so. So our technology, our the control of our technology is really connected to the structure of our wealth, right? So if you control technology, if you're the one who wields its development and its use, then you will be able to command more wealth than others who don't have that control over the same technology. So we have Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Alphabet. These are trillion-dollar companies, and yeah, if even their CEOs are the richest persons in the world right now. And this kind of concentrated wealth is occurring under a society where we haven't resolved poverty yet. So this is a picture from Tijuana, where Amazon built its it's a huge warehouse, and where it stores all of its automated robots, stacking shelves, and they are surrounded by slums. This is very cyberpunk, right? This the recurring theme of cyberpunk, which is high tech and low life. You need not go to the future to see it. It's actually right here. And we can feel a society that surrounds us, wherein we have multiple advanced gadgets, and some families can't even feed themselves, and they have to resort to primitive backyard planting. Yeah, if they can do so at all. And one of the reasons, of course, is uh, these people who are left behind cannot be employed under the existing structure. So maybe it's a matter of skills, but with artificial intelligence, we do know that even the most creative of individuals, most intelligent of individuals are vulnerable. We have transitioned from a society where computers are like those who the women of NASA. They solve differential equations on the board, and we have replaced them with computers. We are transitioning now into a society where even coders with it, or even artists can actually be replaced by AI. Specifically, since for employers, it's not a matter of being so good at your job, but reaching a particular threshold. And once that threshold is reached, uh they would see additional quality, which a human can provide, to be superfluous, right? So it doesn't matter how good of an artist you are, because for them you just have to reach a certain minimum. If AI reaches that minimum, then you'll be unemployed, right? So yeah, so we go to the math, of course, to understand this, to understand the economics of inequality, the economics of how technology shifts the power of labor and capital, their relative power. We'll have to look at a production function. We have to look at an economy as a production function, where you have Y, the output. You can see it as a GDP, or whatever metric that you use to measure the output. Some economies use gross output, which is not just the final demand, but even the intermediate consumption. But for our purposes, Y is output. So and you have the total labor productivity, which is just a multiplier of the output, right? If the better the general state of the technology, the higher your economy, the stronger your economy is, right? The more output that you can produce. And this is the important inputs: your labor and your capital. So if you see, all of the things that we produce right now uses labor, in terms of people doing particular tasks, and capital, which is represented as machines, right? Or instruments of production. And the important parameter here is the output elasticities, sigma 1 and sigma 2. So you can just summarize it as sigma. And this is indicates some sort of a substitutability parameter for capital and technology. So imagine you have a particular output, right? We have particular output Y, and suppose you reduce your labor. Uh, the elasticities, the sigma, gives you an idea on how much capital you need to, or how much labor you need to put in, so as to maintain a certain level of output. Right. So you can see it that way. That it is a parameter of substitutability, and that is something that we will be looking into later.
Are the
The
sigma
elastic.
here exponentials, or I'm just reading it wrong?
Yes, it's exponentials.
Okay.
That's the model. Of course, all models are not a perfect description of reality, but that's how economists usually depict it. Because anyway, if you want it to be additive, you'll just have to put a logarithm there. So it won't be an exponential anymore, but a factor. So, yeah, but for simplicity, they usually put it as a factor, as an exponential. And another important ratio, besides another parameter but sigma, is the capital income ratio. This is how much GDP you have to produce in order to reach your certain level of capital. So, for instance, suppose my net worth is $1 million, and I earn $50,000 a year. So it will take me roughly 20 years to get to my level of income. right? So it is a measure of wealth. It is a measure of how powerful your economy is, how
So should
powerful.
this be above 1 or below 1? Parang capital to income.
It's supposed to be above one, right? Kasi parang you can see this as your savings index. How much
Tama.
how much of your monthly income or daily income or yearly income would you have in order to reach your level of savings? So it's supposed to be has changed across time, and the higher beta is, that the more full capital is. Right. If you're to see current production, and the more power capital owners have over the workers, because the workers get their share right away, right? As wages. So yeah, I'll be discussing this later, but you just have to, yeah, sort of memorize that sigma is the elasticity and beta is the capital income ratio. That's
Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah. For Piketty, he has this very huge tome, his magnum opus, yung Capital in the 21st Century, and his thesis is that beta is increasing in U.S., Europe, and Japan. So from the 1950s, where you have beta at 300%, so basically you have 3 years of your GDP as your savings, as your total capital. It has increased into 600%. So that's an average, an average beta of 2 to 3 years. Uh, 2 to 3 years of your average income is, that's how your wealth is. It increased to about 5 to 6 years. So currently, that's roughly half real estate, half financial assets. So his question is, are we heading back to a society where we will observe 600 or 700% of beta, which is what it looks like during the 18th century and 19th century, where we have kings, where we have all of these aristocrats ruling over society, pre-democracy, right? So, or maybe even more. So that's his question. And if we are going to look at the data, it looks like we're headed that way. So this is Germany, France, and United Kingdom. When you have all of these monarchs ruling in the 18th and 19th century, you have 700 to 600% beta, and now you
I love how they have statistics going back to the 19th century when
yeah.
wala lang. Tayo, we struggle getting stats from 5 years ago. I don't know, wala lang. Just thinking out loud.
Well, it's well, if you are a kingdom, you do collect taxes, and they do a sophisticated accounting. So maybe because we haven't been able to form our own kingdoms or our own state structures. Yeah, it's very saddening. But we do have, later I'll show the data for the Philippines. But it basically, the trend is not just for Europe and North America, but even Japan would have the same picture. Sorry, it's a bit, the image is not a bit, it's a bit blurry, but yeah, you get the gist.
Very economics.
Yeah.
Iba
Very
usually mga
economic.
graph sa econ. Like, what is this graph talking about? Yeah. Yeah, carry on, carry on.
Yeah. Well, his another of his thesis is that your capital income ratio, your beta, is related to the savings growth ratio. So this is a long run projection, a long run trend. So if your society is saving a lot, but it's not growing as much, then you'll have the dominance of capital eventually. Right? But if your savings is growing just a little bit faster, or maybe just as fast as your growth rate, then capital won't dominate. So, but since we are now back to a low growth society, a low growth world, particularly because of population, a decrease in the population hike. We have societies like Japan having low fertility rates, even China has low fertility rates. This is, you can look at it as the production of your labor. right? Growth in Western societies or even in some of the developing world has already slowed, and because of that, the capital is taking hold again. And particularly capital owners because they are the ones in control, right? So for the Philippines, the capital income ratio is actually increasing. It has increased. The last time it has increased that much was before martial law, when Marcos was able to use it as an excuse to clamp down on the oligarchy, right? They sort of spread these rumors that Lopez, which uh, the Lopez family, which was instrumental in bringing in electric technology in the Philippines, right? They created Meralco back then, or they were able to own Meralco back then in the 1960s. They were a very rich family. They have a tram network in place before. So yeah, so yeah, before martial law, it was really very high, and then martial law came in. But even Marcos created his own crony, so capital income ratio recovered back until the post EDSA, and now we are almost as high, if not higher. I think it's already higher, our capital income ratio, just before things get revolutionary, right? So it also tells us about the evolution of technology, if the periods of technological growth, and how it affects our levels of inequality. So you have the share of capital and share of labor actually emanating from these ratios. So in fact, if you multiply your rate of return, your profit rate, your to the capital income ratio, you get the share of income from capital, and the rest of that, technically, if you've removed taxes already, that what will be left is the gains from labor, the share of labor in income. So if your capital stock is like 6 years of income and your average return is 5%, then your predicted share of capital in the total income would be something like 30%. So this is the trend in Britain and France. So as you can see, the the labor income is really high, but during periods of severe inequality in the 1800s, uh, the share of capital, the share of labor is shrinking, and the share of capital is increasing. So that's the general trend, and in other countries as well. But of course, since there's no data, so we'll have to rely on post-war data. You'll see that in just before the financialization era of the 1980s, Reagan, Thatcher era, you'll see yeah you'll see that capital since then, capital share has increased. And in the Philippines, it's actually reversed. Capital share is higher than labor share since the 1990s. Unfortunately, we don't have an older data, but we really are a very high inequality society if you're going to look at these graphs. So the Piketty's question is, will the rise of the capital income ratio be also lead to a rise of capital share because of that equation? And this brings us back to the elasticity of substitution, sigma, between capital and labor. So sigma measures the extent to which workers can be replaced by machines, but can be replaced by capital. The standard assumption is that the sigma is equal to 1. So basically, the proportion of capital that you need to bring in, if you have a labor loss, would be pretty much the same. So they are perfect substitutes, right? This is the standard assumption. So if that is so, if they are perfectly substitutable, then the stock capital stock beta, if you increase it, then the return would decrease in the same proportion, right? So the capital share would be so the capital share in income would be static, would remain the same. So it's a stable world where capital and labor split is set by technology. So it's really stable. But if this is, and this is empirically tested, if sigma is greater than one, then the return to capital would fall less than than the increase in the volume of your capital stock. So basically, the capital share increases. So it all depends on the sigma. If you're if it's
So in this
easier
case,
to
sigma is a given or is something that is a characteristic of a market or an economy, parang ganon.
yes, it's a dynamic thing. So basically, under some societies, maybe it's even less than one. It's harder for workers to be replaced by machines. In other societies, it's easy, but it's just one, right? It's perfect. It's not it's the substitutability is normal, if you can look at it that way. And if in the in during periods of rapid technological growth, sigma might actually exceed one, so that it's easier for employers, for firms to replace workers with machines. And this is where it impacts inequality, because the fall in your profit rate, because if you add more capital, it is subject to diminishing returns, right? The more you add capital, the less your returns will be on the succeeding capital. But the fall in the return of capital is not less than the fall of the
But
volume. It's not less than the deceleration of your capital stock. Eh, Sorry, I'm spewing a lot of economic terms, but
yeah, yeah. No, I just realized this could be in a way a soft indicator of an industrial revolution, diba? So
yes.
you would think sigma would be very high during periods of industrial revolutions where there's a rapid adoption or disruption due to a technology. Whereas in certain times, I remember when we were younger, parang sigma might have been very low kasi parang every year is the same as the previous year. And then shortly after that, there's suddenly a spike of adoption. Although these days, parang sunod-sunod, no? New and new technologies every year are coming to fore.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at your gadgets in the 90s, I mean, if you compare it with your gadgets right now, it's really a huge technological leap. We used to think of video conferencing then as sci-fi, or mobile phones, even mobile phones as late as 1980s as sci-fi. But right now it's commonplace, and even the poorest segments have access to it. So yeah, it's the growth that we had, the technological development that we had for the last 40 years is really astounding. And that would only mean that maybe sigma is greater than one, and that yeah, and we might be looking at a an inequality inducing technological development.
You know what? Suddenly realized then. I mean, carrying the analogy forward, you would have situations where one area of the world has a different sigma compared to another
Yeah.
area, and that disbalance can cause stuff not to happen. No? I don't, is that part of the phenomena that we're trying to measure?
Yeah, there are actual models relating sigma to outsourcing, to because you want to reduce transaction costs, right? So you want to sort of export your labor intensive jobs while importing capital intensive jobs. So parang that is what is happening, that you are getting labor from societies where the sigma is low, while maintaining your own sigma, while you're maintaining your own yeah, labor capital substitutability. So yeah, there is a lot of literature on that. But
Yeah,
of course, in the end, it will have to equilibrate, right, into a single sigma, or
parang
even not
blended
so.
sigma,
Yeah,
ganun.
yeah,
Yeah,
blended sigma.
another thing that occurs to me, and sorry to interrupt your lecture, no, but parang the OFW phenomena and the and the BPO phenomena are kind of antithesis. You know what I mean? So, and maybe if we use Sigma as the, as the indicator, let's say take nurses, no? Um, we export nurses by the bucket. No? I mean, or ano pa ba? Engineers to the Middle East, white collar workers to Singapore, and they send currency back as remittance. Versus the call center based in the Philippines who receives that outsourced job, no. So I see them kind of as competing modes na okay, there will be cases where it makes more sense to send the job to a low cost country like the Philippines versus just recruiting a bunch of Filipinos at a low cost but bringing them to the States, as in the case of nursing. No? I don't know. I don't know if I overcomplicated it. Pero parang ganun eh. It suddenly hit me na that could be a factor also in terms of itong ganito, no? This phenomena.
Yeah. Actually, that's an interesting comparison because you know you can see it really as a separate dynamic, right? The BPO and the OFW we're in. One is bringing jobs out and bringing workers out, and the other is bringing jobs in. But for economists, actually in their calculation, it's actually the same thing because they do end up earning the same dollars, right? So it's as if so if you're looking at the national income accounts, you will see it as a labor export nonetheless, the BPO, not much different to OFW. You will see it as NFIA, net factor income from abroad. So it's pretty much the same thing for economists. But it's interesting how such a sociologically different phenomenon is seen as the same
As
same
one
numbers.
phenomena.
Yeah.
And by the way, I haven't checked the latest figures, but as of the first quarter, I don't know if it's last year or this year, that figure has not gotten back to former levels, pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I noted that as one of the biggest drops. Manufacturing then. Pero anyway, different topic. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the question is, what if you increase sigma higher and higher? If you increase it to a higher and higher level, you will actually see a pure robot economy, sigma, where sigma is infinite. So it is not, of course, this not really an entirely bad thing, right? If we want a society where we could devote more time to education, culture, and health, rather to our own subsistence, rather than just producing things over and over again, we want to be more productive, and in the consequence of that, we will have more capital stock, we will have more instruments, we'll automate more things, and we will want to reach a pure robot economy, right? Robot not just in the physical sense, but even in the cognitive sense. We have chat gpt producing our memos for us, our correspondences, our even some of our art, right? If we want a base for our poems, we want to run it through ChatGPT first, and then we improve on that. It saves us time, and it allows us to be more creative. So, but the question is, in all of this is, who owns the robots? Who owns these machines, which makes life very wonderful for the rest of for the world? So is it just a few, a scant few, in which case they control all of the benefits of those robots of the of the Sigma, and yeah, or is it or do we want to blur the boundary between labor and capital, wherein even labor has access to capital gains? So that's the question. And in fact, you can see it as this kind of situation is really popping up as all sorts of paradoxes. So you have the solo productivity paradox, wherein the rapid rise of the computer technology in North America and the way it exported it around the world has not really reflected in productivity stats. You see all of these IBM computers, all of these Windows software development, DOS development coming in the late 80s, but you're not seeing any growth. So actually, it's really a puzzle for most economists. And one of the one of the reasons is because automation or rapid technological growth basically displaces people out of their jobs, even if they it's not just a matter of creating new jobs, throwing old people out of jobs and creating new jobs. It's the rate of increase in the new jobs rate, right? And it's the number of person hours displaced. So you have actually, if you look at the statistics, as employment went down, underemployment went up, right? I mean, people are looking more are looking for more work hours, because even if they have their jobs, it's not enough to pay for whatever expenses that they have. So it's really an underemployment problem. So the question is, if we are displacing all of these unproductive person hours because of technology, why aren't we? Why isn't this reflecting as increased productivity in the books, right? Why aren't we seeing more growth? And the you know the problem really lies on the definition of productivity, which is actually aggregate profit on units sold. So if you're producing all of these things, and if you're not really selling as much, and unemployment or less working hours or underemployment means that people buy less hours, um, the less hours people work, that since they are paid by the hour or by labor, then the less disposable income that they have. So the
Pero that
capacity,
definition of
yeah.
productivity is a classical one, no, in economics. It's not defined anywhere, anywhere else differently.
Well, if you're going to look at why, or any measure of productivity that you have, it's really production basically, and in there's this identity where production should always equal income, right? So all of these are sold goods, sold services, services which has already been paid for in the market. Right. So, I mean, that's one way to look at it. It's production divided by the number of people producing it, or the number of capital you mobilized. If you're looking at capital productivity, so if you're not selling as much stuff, or there is some underconsumption, then it might lead to a situation where high technological growth will not lead to increased productivity, because production is goods and services sold, right? It's measured that way. It's not just classical definition, because even more sophisticated calculations of productivity really looks at I mean, accounting wise, you look at production, you look at how much you earned
Pero
from
'di ba
what you
in
produce.
theory, using this definition, kasi kung value added, if you can produce more with less cost, supposedly, right?
Mm.
Then that counts also as productivity, right? So yun ang promise. Dapat either you produce more or you produce the same or more but with less. Technically, you made more, no? Parang ganun ba yun? Can it work that way?
Well, for firm level, ganun, di ba? Parang of course some firms would I mean, employ less people and produce more. So in the end, they'll have more productivity, right? But if you look at it economy wise, this means that some firm won't be producing as much, or would have no what do you call this, would have not as much sales, because the total labor pool from which you would derive your market from is tanked, because you paid people less. So it might it if you look at it at a firm level, it makes sense, right? That you just that productivity is related to or you just need to increase your technology in order to be more productive. But general wise, economy wise, it might not look the same. So in fact, there's this quote from Mikhail Kalecki, a Polish economist, that the logic for in a market system is the workers spend what they get and the capitalists get what they spend, right? Because they if they invest on something, they eventually get it. But for workers, they whatever wages that they get, they will likely spend it all for particular goods. And this is why partially explains the productivity paradox. It's because workers might not be able to spend anything if they're not getting anything. So which means that the capitalists might not get in the proportion. I mean, might get less in proportion of their investments. Right. So this in Caysian sense, what is happening
I'm
in
sorry
a
to
high
keep
growth society.
interrupting, no? I'm also thinking out
Yeah.
loud. Does this capture also a phenomena of like overemployment, but at an individual level? So for example, I'm a freelancer or I'm an employee. Because of technology, I'm able to do 10 times as many tasks. But as a result, my employer doesn't need too many employees. So it will reduce employment.
Mm.
So in theory, unemployment could go up, but for the people who are employed, they become super productive in theory and overcome the net loss, no, of all of those other workers. So you have a phenomena where there's actually more productivity, ironically, but less people working. I don't know. Does that make sense? Kung ganun.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, at the micro level, it happens all the time, right? A new hyper productive firm comes in with hyper productive workers, but in the end, at the end of the day, that firm would have to sell to the general market, right? And you're selling at a general market of relatively low productivity people, which means they will have lower capacity to
Less
pay.
buying power. Tama.
Yeah, less purchasing power. That is why, I mean, in the Philippines, that brings us back to the phenomenon of remittances of BPOs and OFWs. I mean, how do we even sustain this low wage economy? Uh, and it is by by getting money from elsewhere. I mean, by working elsewhere and bringing money here, because you know you won't be able to sustain this particular GDP growth at this level of productivity. So it's like we are solving our paradox, by exporting our problems, by getting labor income from elsewhere. But if we are going to total it, the global system, it's a problem indeed. The problem of overproduction and underconsumption, and we are seeing it especially during times of crisis, during times of the financial crisis. You have all of these wealth that can't be that has been locked. Uh, but all of these houses that has been produced, and no one is living on it, right? Because of the housing crisis, because of people, they can't afford those houses. You have you have a so productive um food manufacturing industry in the world right now. It's really it's really fascinating how productive our plantations are, our food manufacturing plants are, and yet we have billions of people who can't afford food. So this is all the reflection of the same phenomenon, where technological development leads to underconsumption. And if we are going to push it further, uh, you'll have technological growth which doesn't lead necessarily to productivity growth, because you know uh, your market is much of your market is not really capital owners, but labor owners, yeah, labor producers, your workers basically. But you know maybe you'll end up having huge luxury industries, right? Where the rich is, they don't know where to spend their money anymore. So they're earning a lot from all of this technological growth, so they'll just buy from another rich person.
Which explains
Yeah.
why we have third world salaries but first world prices. in the
Yeah,
Philippines.
yeah.
It's really insane, no? Grabe.
So yeah, if we push it further, what happens when all of labor is substituted by machines in this kind of society, in this kind of economy? So basically, all productions will be controlled by owners of the machine, and there will be no need for labor, right? Because all of these creative work, uh, they, I mean, it doesn't make sense for them to push it further and further anyway. They just have to reach a certain level of minimum, at least for the owners of the machines, owners of capital. And that this might result to a rapid depopulation through underconsumption. I mean, starvation, increase in mortality rate, and the remaining artisans, the old middle class, they I mean, if once you eliminated the working class, the old working class, you have the middle class becoming the new working class, right? And then in this society, you'll see business cycles with increasing amplitude and frequency, but the rich are unaffected. So you'll have more financialization, creating new assets out of thin air. You have, in the 1980s, we have penny stocks. In 1990s, we have junk bonds, hedge derivatives, 2000s, hedge funds in 2010s. And now you're seeing the phenomenon of cryptocurrency, which is really gyrating and impoverishing people left and right. I mean, of course, making people rich at the same time. So you have all of these
Alam mo, for
increasingly.
me, syempre, not an economist, but I see all of that just as artificial inflation of money supply, you know,
Yes.
backed by nothing. Yan, crypto, pati yung ano, yung securitization, you just created more paper assets without any underlying value. But maybe siguro in that case, I'm recalling from my banking days, at least there were houses that were built on the back of loans that were securitized. So in a way, it's kind of a weird thing. Nauna yung nauna yung money supply bago gumalaw yung services. Pero yun na nga, maybe the ratio was completely off the charts. Like too much securities, too little actual value. Kaya the whole thing had to collapse. And then the same thing works in crypto, NFTs. Yun talaga, there's really no assets, nothing.
Yeah.
So yung volatility of the market reflects that. The value can be anything. Wala nang base, walang standard. So there's no ultimate backstop. Kasi with an actual asset, if a market misprices that significantly enough, somebody will actually come in and buy it back, no? Para mabalance. Pero sa crypto wala. So yeah, poor crypto holders.
Well, ang estimate nga ni ano kasi I mean, Nassim Taleb, the Black Swan person, he did his math on this, and he estimated the average, at least for Bitcoin, the average value of Bitcoin is zero. I mean, in the long run. So, and
Which is
there are many
tama
factors.
naman because it's nothing, right? So you have to
Yeah, I mean,
assume.
yeah. So yeah, that leads us to the next point, which is you have more role for monetary creation, which leads to asset inflation. And because of that, you'll have credit supported consumption. You'll have the underemployed, relying on loans in order to consume. That is what happened in the late 2000s in the US. They really pumped up their consumption by getting loans from China, right? Because China is really very productive, so they tend to buy all of these treasury bonds. So yeah, we support our consumption through credit, and at the end, in the end, we even create bullshit jobs that have like what David Graeber has described. You have all of these unnecessary administrative jobs being inserted along the way, even in corporations, even in uh, not just in government, but even in corporations, wherein you could have chopped down on middle management, but it's something that persists because you have all of these extra surplus, extra profit to push around. So this brings us to the question of, if do we prefer this kind of society where technology is really creating uh, a massive indebtedness amid bullshit jobs, amid high inequality, amid all of these problems, or do we want a society where automation frees us, all of us, to pursue our creative pursuits. And yeah, obviously the answer is yes. We want a better automation. We want a better AI led society, an AI driven society. And this calls for a just transition. And there are many elements to this. There are many proposals for this, but uh, the most the most popular ones would be with something would include UBI, the Universal Basic Income, where you return to society as income, the gains from technology, the gains from wealth and capital. You want to have a society where capital is allocated rationally, maybe by AI themselves. In this way, it's not really concentrated on a few hands alone. And we want to transition to a society where instead of being unemployed, uh, we'll have a society where we have more time. So we will be paid the same money, but we'll have more time to do something else. Because at the end of the day, that is what this automation is about, right? So UBI has actually already been explored as an anti-poverty measure, as a means of income redistribution. In the US, it was proposed as a negative income tax by Milton Friedman, Treasury Secretary. So it is unconditional, which means there is no means testing. Every adult citizen or household receives a fixed amount from the government. And it's not yet implemented in a countrywide scale, but there were experiments and proposals. So you have the Swiss referendum on basic income, which failed, but you have Andrew Yang, U.S. Democratic Party nominee, pushing for it. You have Varoufakis, former Greek minister, proposing this universal basic dividend, wherein UBI is deposited directly by the central bank to your account. Right? Because right now that we create money via fiat anyway, right? The central bank declares that all of these banks have uh, you know uh, they change all the reserve requirements, reserve ratios all the time, and that leads to monetary creation. Why not create monetary creation by depositing the money themselves to people? So that's his proposal. And Thomas Piketty, the French economist, has this proposal for inheritance for all. It's a lump sum that you get from the government by age 25. So it's not really a regular income, but a boost for you. You'll get an inheritance from the government by age 25. So all of these proposals are considered. But right now, even before those proposals are operational, we are already seeing massive cash transfers experiment. You have Bolsa Familia. As of 2020, you have 13.8 million families. You have Indonesia doing such cash transfer experiments. The program Kelargua Harapan. You have something like that from Turkey and other Latin American countries. All of these have conditional cash transfers. For South Africa, they do have unconditional cash transfers, and yeah, it's increasing over time. In fact, even in the Philippines itself, we have experimented and with huge success, if I may add, the CCT, this Pantawid Pamilya Filipino program. So we have been able to give cash to 3.9 million households, and we are seeing effects in reduced poverty, reduced mortality, increasing nutrition of children, etc. So this is just to demonstrate that it is possible, that it can be done, and all you'll have to have is some sort of a political will to do so. And to fund all of these, of course, you want to redistribute some control of over capital, and you can do that through a wealth tax. You can, you know, you may want to look into the ownership of capital itself, and maybe realize that they're not really doing that much anymore. The managers and the owners of financial wealth. So I mean, you're automating the financial sector through HFTs. So I mean, all of these brokers, all of these you know, old school traders are not actually redundant anyway, kasi because you can automate all of these financial decisions. At the same time, you can also automate operational decisions. Most companies right now are operated by automated ERPs, by enterprise resource planning software suites. So, and there's little role to middle management, except perhaps punishing punishing the deviants in a particular company. So but most of the operational decisions can actually be optimized through automation. And in fact, in whole of society, if we can harness such kind of automation anyway, and maybe have a more public way of determining our capital allocation, we'll see that across history, public capital allocation has actually worked. We have created the basis of our technological society with DARPA, with the US government directly investing in particular technologies. I mean, public capital allocation has been beneficial to us also. Imagine if we use AI for that as well. And in fact, we can even go to an extreme and look at experiments such as cyber scene of Chile during Allende's time, wherein they experimented on using telex machines to coordinate production across all state corporations. That's 1970s, right? I mean, we even have more sophisticated technologies right now. So capital can be socialized. HFT bots can be can you can use them to allocate automatically your capital. And management can be also automated if you combine machine learning with ERP. So there, we want to work. We also want a society where we eliminate involuntary unemployment. Right, that's full employment basically. I mean, people can choose not to work, but still be okay. So and there are all sorts of proposals for that. You have the job guarantee program, which comes in so many different names. Yeah. So, but eventually, we want a society where we work less and live more. Right. We want we want a society where all of us are partake in luxury, in the luxury of living. And even to the extent that we want to make sure, because there are all of these AI alignment people which looks at transhumanism, right, as a goal where we merge with the machines. But it will not be, it will be empty. It will be inhumane if it is not accessible for all. Right? We should all be merging in the machines, and not just leaving everyone else to die, and some of the rich billionaires get to do so. And yeah, basically the goal is, to create a heaven on earth. I mean, to recreate heaven as a place on earth rather than just an imaginary place which is dangled to us through
Data
through
center pa
various means.
talaga, ano, yung heaven mo, ano?
A- ac- Actually, ang ano yan, ang inspiration yan is yung isang Black Mirror episode na they actually use this song. They basically hook up dead people to servers, and they live simulated lives which are full of joy. So maybe that's something we can also do. Yeah, I like to end with that, and yeah, maybe we have some. Oh,
Yeah, we
sorry,
still have time.
medyo sakto lang pala tayo.
Actually, one, ano na nga, almost the hour. Maybe, ano lang, just reflecting on this, no?
Yeah.
And that was a great, ano, lecture, no? Kasi there's so many imperfect, I would say, imperfect understanding of the situation, ano, right now. Like, for example, when the Washington Post aired or released their story, it on the digital sweatshops. I don't know if you saw that. It kind of highlighted the fact that even AI, with all of its wondrous automation potential, still requires human labor to generate the data set. And I don't think that will end. Kasi nga, you cannot be feeding AI generated data to AI because it will just destroy the distribution. So it's like averaging an average as we discussed before. So kailangan talaga human generated yung input with all of its faults, no? It's kind of the way it should work. And conceivably with the rate of data absorption modeling happening, hindi malabo na we run out of human generated data already to feed these new models. So do we just decide to just stop and then apply na lang the models muna and maybe they do a hiatus? Okay, don't gather any new data until 1 year from now para lang may bagong, and in one instant makuha mo na lahat yung 1 year in the next retraining, di ba? So it doesn't really bode well for future AIs unless there's a new paradigm. Kasi obviously it can't all be about chatbots. Maybe there are other data points that need to be ingested, especially in automation. Kasi automation can be physical automation. You can have sensor data from servos. Those can be ingested. A la reinforcement learning, no? You can create these agents, and maybe that's the next level na. Tapos na yung text, tapos na yung images. Ano na tayo? Human movement na, human interaction na. But anyway, that being said, it's just bizarre how people kind of forget na human labor is necessary. Now, the other point that also struck me about your lecture is the transfer of value. I think that's the big question mark, because it's so abstracted already. It naturally flows back to owners of capital. So they're the ones who run the companies, who develop these models, which displays a lot of labor. So I'm wondering where it will all potentially end, no? And I think it's really the transition period that's crucial. See, that's the most painful part. Maganda na sana if we can jump to that utopia where no one needs to work, the machines run everything. Pero hindi, di ba? We're kind of in this imperfect world. Humans still do most of the work, but then painfully we're going to transition to that world. And then take it from the perspective of the Philippines, which is probably medyo, I don't think we're at the bottom of the totem pole. I think we're sort of in the lower middle, only because we're part of the global economy by virtue of the OFWs, by virtue of the BPOs, or maybe the export sector like manufacturing. In a way, we still have a role to play. And that excludes the geopolitical component because of our location. So where does that put us? Kasi yung mga naturally consumption-driven countries na lang, they're really gonna get screwed kasi no one will hire them and they won't be able to buy anything. Tayo, there's still a period where OFWs continue to send money back home and BPOs continue to function up until the point where, which is the fear of everyone, the BPOs themselves become irrelevant or become redundant because customer service can be done by a chatbot. So why send that work pa to anywhere like the Philippines? Baka nga ironically yung OFWs na lang yung maiwan din. They started with them, ends with them because we still continually need, and the labor we export potentially still labor that's hard to automate, like nursing. It's hard to automate that for now. So we still need a supply of cheap nurses going to the first world and building a career abroad. And we're not even talking about the kind of the knowledge workers, no? We do have those. We have accountants in the Caymans. We have developers going to Singapore and the US. Obviously, we are eclipsed by people from India. Just many more Indians doing that work compared to Filipinos. But at least meron. And then back home, the vast majority of the remaining working population, wala talaga. As in, it will be maybe it will be dependent on local industry to the extent that they can provide employment, which is unlikely. It could be still dependent on the government. The government employs the most number of people. But I don't even know if we want to go there in terms of how efficient government has been using it. So ganun, no? Any thoughts on that as a takeaway? I think we need to do a follow-up to this immediately para we can reflect, no?
Yeah, actually maganda yung first point mo kanina. I want to react to that first. Yung sa, of course, all of these AI development is still underpinned on human labor, right? You have all of these people who are tagging stuff, but Actually, it reminds me of the other, I mean, of a few months ago, where na-realize ko na, ba, Twitter lang ako. Tapos parang I spent the whole day using Twitter, and I realized that all of those likes, all of those engagements, it feels like work, right? Work that you want to do, but work nonetheless, kasi it takes your time, it takes your energy. So maybe that's also, you can look at even our usage of all of these social media platforms, where we share our data, not just actual data, personally identifiable data, but our preferences, our wants, our desires. We share it willingly to the algorithm. It's also labor, right? It's also unmonetized work, so, or unpaid work. So it's something that we have to look at too, na labor din yun, na even our consumption. And at the same time, tama ka na ang Philippines ay nasa, yun nga, medyo hindi naman tayo tama, hindi naman tayo basket case. Pero we are really way behind in terms of dun sa cutting edge of technologies, being participants in the creation of new algorithms. But I think ang crucial role dun is, since marami tayong naiwan na mga tao na they can't hitch the AI ride because they lack skills, maybe we can make use of the existing AI tools to increase our skills. Like we used AI more and more dapat sa education. We automate as much of that as possible, since teaching is backbreaking work, and maybe there are lots of ways to educate our children. Like in the 1980s, the experiment in the eastern coast, the experiment on PBS experimented on using Sesame Street to educate African American neighborhoods, marginalized neighborhoods, and it actually worked in terms of producing more knowledge workers in that area, because you've been investing on education, on kids using TV. Maybe we can do the same thing through AI, and that is maybe the way to actually catch up, like using AI to eventually be AI contributors, rather than AI users. So there are so many. This opens up a can of worms, so to speak, lots of problems. But yeah, they'd be interesting to discuss some other time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think yun na nga eh. And maybe that's the point. Let's leave everyone on an open note, no? Para they come back for more. So, yeah, there's more to this economic puzzle that we need to figure out. And that's why I love having conversations with a wide variety of like there's so many parallels I can draw, for example, between your talk and obviously si Professor Tihanki, si Jeric Cruz had very good discussions on the political economy. Yeah, baka in one future chat we can have all three of you in one go and let's see what happens. No?
Yeah.
And then of course the subtle nuances of yun na nga, the AI safety area which is really just happening under the radar. No one cares about it. Sorry na lang kay Miguel for now, no, but hopefully we can help more people like him. Which is so the last point I want to make sure is everyone realizes all of this discussion is so detached from the mainstream discussions on AI, or data science or whatever, machine learning. So a lot of people actually have remarks about why I haven't even talked about the actual AI, the act of creating AI itself. And my point is, you can find all of that on YouTube already. Every
Yeah.
other person is teaching you how to do machine learning and Python. We can do that too, but it's all of these other conversations that no one talks about. That's important. We need to talk
Yes.
about that, and it requires multidisciplinary inputs. I don't know if you saw that chat I had with Dr. Kahilig, si Pamela, on data
Pamela
feminism.
Kahilig.
Yeah, that was a good chat, data feminism, because she was relating data to power structures,
Oh,
critical
that's
theory.
interesting. I haven't
Yeah,
seen that yet, but
check
yeah,
it
I'll
out. Check
probably
it
check
out.
it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll have the link in the description.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, pero ganon pare, I think it's good that you're able to share this, and I hope the PUP audience appreciated it. Actually, I work a lot with PUP students. as interns. Suking-suki na ako doon. Lalo the economics department. Dami ko mga ano doon. Anyway, sige, I digress. Thanks a lot for the chat, Jim, no? And
Thank
hopefully
you.
I get it. No, we have you for a follow-up. Iba pa yung three-way or two-way chat. We'll do that eventually. Pero a follow-up to this kasi I think we need to discuss more of it.
Sige, salamat din for the time and interest. Thank you.
Okay.